You didn't give me a cue and I missed it, did you? Okay. All right.
I'm just watching.
Okay. Good evening. I'd like to open the Algonquin Regional School Committee meeting of December 21st, 2022 at 6:36. First on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone in the public? No public comments at this time. So we'll move to action on minutes. We have the open meeting minutes of November 16th, 2022. Any comments or action to vote?
I make a motion to accept the open meeting minutes of November 16th, 2022.
Okay, motion by Chris.
Second.
Second by Paul. All in favor? Unanimous, passes. We have action on the executive session minutes of November 16th, 2022. We need to vote and retain those. Are there any questions? Joan?
I just have a motion.
Okay.
I move that we accept and retain the executive session minutes of November 16th, 2022.
Motion by Joan.
Second.
Second by Paul. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Next is the educational policy. So we have approval of the Algonquin Writing Center overnight field trip to the annual secondary. Be annual if it's only second. School Writing Center Association Conference in Washington, D.C. I guess Principal Bevan or Superintendent Martineau, could you speak
So
to
we'll have
that?
Principal Bevan provide an overview of the experience for students, and then answer any questions the committee may have.
Sure. So as I understand it, this is a trip our school has done several times in the past, and it allows students who are involved in our Algonquin Writing Center, which is what it kind of the name suggests. It's a tutoring-based center here in our school. There's a little bit more than that. The students participate or enrolled in a class in the day where they really explore the basics of writing and of providing feedback and of working on their own writing and working on others' writing. And so they're trained, and then they provide this as a tutoring experience. This conference is in Washington, D.C., and not only do our students hope to participate in it, 3 of our students have been asked to present at this conference. So our 2 teachers, Seth Sarnecki and Sarah Stein, are very active in the Writing Center, kind of the small kind of ecosystem of others who do this kind of work, and tell me it's a wonderful conference. They've had great experiences in the past, and we're hopeful that they can do it again this year.
Questions? It's terrific that they've been asked to present. I mean, that's an honor, yeah. If there are no questions, need a motion to approve the trip?
I'll move that we approve the annual field trip from the Algonquin Writing Center field trip to the Secondary School Writing Centers Association Conference in Washington, D.C., March 16th through 18th, 2023. Seconded.
Okay, so motion by Paul, seconded by Matthew, all in favor?
So I do have one comment.
Oh, sure.
I think it was 2 years ago. My daughter was heavily involved in the Writing Center, and they were scheduled to go to this conference and waiting with bated breath, and then it got canceled at the last second, at the very beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
I'm happy to vote in favor of it this time.
Terrific. So motions to accept, all in favor? Unanimous, that passes.
Thank you.
To new business. We have a vacancy for Southborough, and we have a interested candidate, John Wysocki. It'd be great if he could come to the microphone, and we can talk about vacancy. Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Would you just like to express your interest and why you're interested in joining the regional committee?
Yeah, thank you. So my name's John Wysocki. I've been a resident of Southborough for about 12 years now. We moved here for the education, and certainly education has been something that's been very important to me and my family for a very, very long time. It's interesting because I actually simply I I was at, my daughter is in 8th grade and my son's in 6th grade at Trottier in Southborough, and I attended the open house for the high school. And I was sitting there, and I was interested in what was going on. I thought it was an excellent presentation. And I thought to myself, geez, I wonder how I could possibly become more active. So I ended up texting my friend, Matt Spencer, and I said, if there are any opportunities on the school committee, I'd really be interested. He said, well, actually, matter of fact, there's a posted opening that's been out there for several months now, and it was, if you're interested, please, certainly reach out. So I did, and here we are. So that's my story.
Perfect timing. I'll open it up to the committee for questions. Paul?
I have a couple. The most important one, I think, are you generally available the third Wednesday of each month?
Generally, yes.
Do you have any thoughts about the high school? I know you probably don't have a ton of experience with it yet, obviously, but any thoughts, pro or con, on?
I came from a very small town and a very small high school, so my thoughts on this high school is it's big. It's very nice. I have the opportunity with my children to go to a lot of other high schools because they do a lot of travel activities, and we go to other areas. It looks very nice. I understand from all of my conversations that the teachers are very committed, and everything that I've seen in the Southborough situation for those teachers, very committed and very small class sizes and dedicated, and they're really interested in children learning, and I presume that it's a similar attitude at Algonquin.
Yeah.
All right. And can you talk a little bit about what you think you might bring to the committee?
Well, I work in IT at State Street Bank and Trust at the investment side. And so I've been in the corporate America for almost 25 years now. Whether or not that's of interest, probably not, but I'm very active personally in youth sports in Southborough. I am on the board for the Algonquin Little League Association as the treasurer. In addition, I assist the family on the basketball, on the Southborough basketball, and am very active in all of the sports that we have here. And so hopefully, I know that there's an opportunity, or there's an interest in perhaps doing something here with our facilities, which is something I'm very interested in, and maybe I can help, lend support there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen?
John, I'd like to thank you for putting your name in the hat for this position, and you're coming in at a time when we're going to be doing the budgets, which we've already started. I saw that you've done the counting, you've done some bookkeeping for the different ones, so for the different organizations that you have done. So we have some subcommittees that we'll be doing. Would you be willing to step forth and go into the baptism of fire of the budget and subcommittee meetings and work on that?
Certainly.
And assist, the committee and the superintendent and the parent principal with that.
Yep, certainly. I was the treasurer for the Holy Cross Club of Boston for 5 or 6 years, and that had a budget, certainly not of this nature, but probably $50,000. And the Algonquin, well, I was treasurer for the Southborough Little League before it merged. Now I'm the assistant treasurer, but yeah, I mean, certainly I'm happy to lend my assistance where I possibly can.
Great. And thank you for all your volunteer work that you've done. I saw that you have, since your daughters have been in school, you've been at Finn School, Woodward, volunteering, and even being on the flex football team here for Algonquin in the football. So you're familiar with everything, even though you don't have any children here. So I think you could step in very well and become a valuable member of our team. So thank you.
Yep, I coached on the flex football team for the Algonquin, but we then decided not to do tackle, but we're coming next year, so.
Could you just enlighten me, what's flex football?
Flex football is one where you don't tackle.
Oh, is it co-ed?
It is, yeah, I mean, they don't particularly care. There was actually, there was 1 or 2 girls that played, but it can be.
Wow.
It's really, there's no rules. But yeah, you block, but you have all the similar plays. And if you actually, if you go out and talk to any professional athletes, it depends on who you're talking to, but a lot of the quarterbacks will say that you actually don't need to tackle until you're getting to high school.
Yeah.
Apparently in the pro season either. Sorry, just had to say that.
What are you referencing?
You weren't gonna feel- Even if you made the tackle, they still weren't going to feel it.
Thank you, John.
Good. Any other questions? Thank you. So this is an appointment by the Southborough members, so I'd look to them to make a motion.
I can do that. And let me lead with saying, as John mentioned, he reached out to me. John is a good friend of mine, comes with my full endorsement. And so as a member of the school committee representing Southborough, I'd like to make a motion to appoint John Wysocki to join the Algonquin School Committee representing Southborough.
Second that?
Okay, motion by Matt and second by Paul. Although it's appointed by Southborough, I think a vote of the full committee, just to show support, would be great. So all in favor? And unanimously that passes. So welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
And I believe now you get to be sworn in.
So the town clerk was just roaming around the building. Perfect timing.
You solemnly swear to hold your responsibilities in a impartial manner as a member of the regional school committee to the best of your ability, so help you God.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay there. Give you a packet.
Put you right to work.
There you go. Okay, so that brings us to number 4, the legislative update.
So just a quick update on the letter that we submitted on behalf of the school committee and the district around the out-of-district tuition cost increases that OSD has communicated to the district. Those increases are 14%. We did submit a letter to our legislative delegation that was co-signed by Sean. We have heard that most likely there will not be a lot of movement on that 14% increase. So our advocacy will shift from the OSD to actually asking for an increase in circuit breaker. So we will be drafting some new letters in the weeks to come for the committee to review, and we'll continue the advocacy on that front.
Okay, thank you. Next is approval of grants and donations, so.
So in your.
No, I skipped one, I did it again. Number 3, discussion and potential appointment of assistant treasurer. I'm sorry, could you speak to that position?
Sure. So Paul Butka, who, as you all know, served on the regional school committee, decided, of all things, to move away from the community, leaving a vacancy. One of the roles he assumed as a school committee member was to serve as the assistant treasurer. We have Christine Tague, who is the treasurer for the district. And what we found over the years is that it was important to have an assistant treasurer in the case that there's a need for the assistant treasurer to step up and help us continue moving forward if something happens to the treasurer. So I think the rule is you can't be in the person can't be in the same room as the treasurer. It's like Congress. The responsibilities really, and Becky can speak to the responsibilities, really are being bonded, and also just if in an emergency, helping assume some of the responsibilities while we create a longer-term solution during that time if there was an issue with the current treasurer.
Yeah, you pretty much summarized it, and I know, like, I've had conversations with members of the committee about this, but really it is acting as a backup to Christine Tague. If something were to happen, this person would have the signatory authority on behalf of the district, and they would also be able to help us with any of our bank transfers. It's part of the separation of duties that occurs at the central office, so the treasurer and the assistant treasurer would be responsible for the bank accounts while I oversee the overall budget and do not have access to those accounts.
So I believe we have one person interested.
Yeah, so I did having seen the agenda, I did reach out to understand what the responsibilities would be. And I, having had a conversation today with Becky and understanding it as it was described, I'd be more than happy to volunteer to take on the assistant treasurer role if it pleases the committee. What I can say to you, if you're not familiar with my professional background, I am an accountant. I'm not sure how relevant it is to the role, but I am also a CPA in Massachusetts. So I think I can, and I do happen to serve as a treasurer for a religious organization that I attend in Southborough as well. So I'm happy to, if there's any questions that you have about it, I'm happy to answer them as well.
Thank you. So, questions, and we need a motion? Yes, okay. Questions or motion, Paul?
I would be happy to nominate Matthew Spencer to take on the role of Assistant Treasurer for
Paul made a motion.
Southborough School District.
Second?
Second by Joan. Any discussion? All in favor?
Do I get to vote for myself?
Yeah. Unanimous.
I would hope so.
Okay.
Matthew?
Thank you very much for.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing it.
Yes, thank you.
There's about 6 hours of work that's backed up. That will-
That's not what they said.
We'll send it over tomorrow.
Whatever it is.
Okay, now, thank you for keeping me on track. Approval of grants and donations.
Sure, so a good news story. So Mike Gorman, the facilities director here at Algonquin Regional High School, did write a Maya grant that was accepted and approved for the amount of $9,680. And basically that software is for facilities management and preventative maintenance. We currently have a software tool, but we're looking to actually sunset that tool and upgrade our system. So this provides an opportunity for us to do that. I will also note that it provides an opportunity for Northborough pre-K through 8 and Southborough pre-K through 8 to use the tool as well. So it has an added value and benefit to our pre-K through 12 system in communities. He also added some ladders in the grant, so we will be getting some additional ladders as a result. So just want to acknowledge Mike Gorman's effort writing the grant and congratulate him for the successful award of the money, and it will go to a review. And we will need a vote of approval to accept the grant.
So is that like just Algonquin's portion of the grant, or is that the whole?
It's the total
grant?
amount. It is
Okay.
Algonquin's amount, and as a result of the purchasing of the software, all three districts will be able to utilize it. So there's no additional funding that the other districts are receiving as a result.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? It's a wide-ranging grant, software
Yes.
and ladders, okay.
Yes. Sometimes you need ladders to do the preventative maintenance.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So a motion to accept the grant in the amount of $9,680
So moved.
by Paul. Motion by Paul.
Second.
Second by Joan. Again, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Yes, that passes. That brings us to the superintendent's report. And I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Martineau.
Sure, so the first item on the superintendent's report is the principal's report, so I will turn it over to Principal Bevan.
Present. So, a little out of the ordinary, we are not starting with some grant or some donation that a bank has provided to us via Ben Schanzer. Part of that is because Ben can't be here tonight, and Amelia Sinclair is joining us, who you met Amelia last time, she's an alternate. But also, it's because the winter ball went off this past weekend and was a big success. So we will return to that as a topic shortly, and I also want to embarrass Ben, who's not here to hear it, but he got into Dartmouth, and we're very proud of him for
Wow.
that wonderful achievement, and we're very happy to see him go on to great success at that level. All right, so let's see. Okay. So good evening, everyone. I'm going to start off and share a few kind of broad and good news or just newsworthy items, and then I want to talk a little bit about a graduation requirements change that we are exploring here at the high school, and to get feedback and talk about a timeline to move forward with that potential change. So interesting to note this week, we had a company called Project Adventure come out and work on a Project Adventure course that is in the tree line back behind the football field, if you know where you may be aware where this is, but it's behind the track. If you're looking at the flags across the track from the stands, in behind there is this ropes course that our wellness and PE courses use for a whole course and team building. And over time, many of those elements were damaged, some by a lightning strike, some by bug damage, and some by trees growing over the different anchoring elements. And so it just was the kind of thing that needed to repair and upkeep. It's also the kind of project that can't be changed in very small increments. So Keith LeBoy was incredibly helpful with Brian Mawson, who's the department head, to bring on board Project Adventure to upgrade the course. And so they just completed that work this week, and they added 9 new elements, including 7 elements that will allow multiple participants to be on the same kind of element of the course at the same time. So it will be really basically expanding the amount of activity time that students have up in those areas. And there's in fact one that allows several participants to be belayed and to be working on the courses. So it's a real fun and exciting part of our school program, and not one that most schools have. And so now it's been upgraded, and we're excited about that. We had the holiday concert last night, so that was a really wonderful affair, and it featured the concert choir, string orchestra, camerata singers, jazz one, chamber choir, and the full orchestra. And it culminated, for anybody, I don't know if anybody was there, but it culminated in all of those groups singing simultaneously with the full orchestra behind them, and then alumni, this is a tradition we have, where alums come out to the show and are invited to come up and to sing along. So in the front row here are some of our students from last year and previous years. So some of whom I recognize because they were my students, and some of whom I think even predate them. It's a wonderful tradition and was a really great way to head off into the holiday season. And then additionally, so Amelia is going to read a note that Ben sent along because he could not be here tonight, so I've asked Amelia to read that for us.
Okay, can I read it off of your computer?
Sure, you can.
Sorry. Dear members, on behalf of the Student Council and the entire student body at Algonquin, I would like to express my gratitude for your support for our annual Winter Ball. Without the donations you approved, the dance would not have been possible, let alone successful. The donations allowed us to keep ticket costs at $50 and provide free tickets to any student who informed their guidance counselor they required assistance. As a result of these efforts, we had nearly 800 students in attendance. It was amazing and only possible with your support, so thank you. Sincerely, Ben Shanzer.
So Ben sends his regards and his many thanks, and I think we have a lot to thank Ben for. It was a really wonderful event. 750 to 800 students at one dance is a really remarkable kind of event. I nearly fell out of my chair when I understood this is what we do as our school tradition, and it was really wonderful. Kids behaved themselves beautifully, everybody had a good time, and the DCU Center staff had many nice things to say about our students. It was really a very nice night that was memorable for, I think, all of our students who attended. Really great night. Okay. And then I wanted to talk to you about a potential change we have been talking about, I think, as a community for some time, and that I've been examining very closely for the last several months, and I wanted to bring it to your attention and to talk through a change that we are considering, and also to talk through the motivations for that change and why it's an important one to consider. So in order to understand the change, I want to just give you an overview of what our graduation requirements are, just to orient you to those. They're not the kind of things that everyone necessarily is aware of as kind of a baseline understanding. So every student, in order to graduate from Algonquin Regional High School, has to achieve 110 total credits. And then, of course, they need to be in a sequence and a certain number of credits in different content areas in order to be the combination that you need to graduate successfully. And here are how those break down. So each credit, each full year class is a 5.0 credit course. So English, as is the requirement in Massachusetts, we require 4 years of 4 full years of English, 3 years of social studies, including one of those years at least being U.S. history. Mathematics, that's 3 years, although most of our students take 4. Digital literacy, that's a half a year. Science is 3 years. Applied arts or fine and performing arts, that's a 2.5 credit requirement that can be achieved by either of those courses, either course in either of those departments. Economics, which is a course run out of the Applied Arts Department. Health and Fitness, which is 2 years, but really broken out over 4 years. It's a half-year course for 4 years, more likely for most students. And then the remainder is fleshed out by one of our many, many wonderful electives that is, I think, probably our school's greatest strengths is the number of electives that we offer in their wide variety. So the two changes I'm looking to make are to take digital literacy, which is a course that our freshmen take as a baseline portion of their freshman year and is a requirement. And to make a change there that I'll explain in a moment. And then also to break apart, we've for a long time had this credit requirement of 2.5 credits in the applied arts or the fine and performing arts. And other than, frankly, the word arts being in those two, designations, there's not a lot of overlap between them. So I don't know that there's a great deal of logic between why a child could meet the graduation requirements in one or the other. So I will talk to you about that as well. So these are the two changes that I'm here to talk about. I think on balance, or kind of like in the grand scheme of things, these are kind of minor changes and ones we've been talking about for some time. And I do think we might want to use this as an opportunity to continue to talk about the other areas of our program that might be worth considering, but I think this is a good place to start. So what I'm suggesting, and will be asking for your consideration, is to give students, incoming freshmen, the option of taking digital literacy or an exploring computer science course. They're not identical. They offer different experiences for different students of different interests, but it still keeps it maintains an element of their freshman year that is oriented around computing and around digital literacy skills, but it does give them a little bit more agency and a little bit more choice than they've had before. And then I'm suggesting that we reduce out the applied arts requirement that was an extra 2.5 credits. The reason for that second portion about eliminating the applied arts department requirement is two things, and I think I get to it in a future slide here. Other courses in the sequence here already come out of that department. So digital literacy is an applied arts class, so that's also 2.5 credits. And economics or personal finance, which can also meet that same credit, is also applied arts. So even before you get to this second red box, we are requiring students to take 5.0 of applied arts, and then we were adding in the ability for students to take that instead of taking a course like photography or band or chorus or something like that. So I think it was somewhat redundant and not totally necessary, and for most of our students, there's such a wide variety of electives in the applied arts that they may very easily take nutrition and early childhood education and many of the other ones that it's not really necessary to name it. So the reason for the change, and these are really two changes, but they are intertwined and hard to disentangle, are really three things that I'll outline. One is that increasing digital literacy skills in students and staff that have happened since these requirements were introduced, and I don't know how long ago, it was many, many years ago. Our students and staff have increased their digital literacy and incorporated that into their teaching and learning routinely in ways that were not common when this was first introduced. Additionally, we are looking increasingly to have our students have more choice and more agency in the kind of courses they take. And then we have an increasing emphasis on, or trying to place an increasing emphasis on, the health and balance of the graduates we produce. So I'm going to talk about the first point first. So as you may or may not be remembering, part of our strategic plan in the last 2 years, which was informed by the district plan, has been for all educators in every department to look closely at how they're teaching digital literacy and/or computer science in their courses, and if they're not, to find ways to do that. So this is no longer an arena that is solely the area of the Applied Arts and Technology Department. If you're an English teacher, you very likely, or should be, doing some type of digital literacy in your course, in your courses, and we help teachers with training to make sure that that was happening. So this has been a 2-year endeavor, and it culminated in this past fall with Brian Callanan and other members of our IT team and our digital learning team providing for teachers a DLCS toolbox. DLCS stands for Digital Literacy and Computer Science. That's the standards created in 2016 that all educators, regardless of department, should be applying. So really, I think all the educators in our building in the last 2 years have tackled the digital literacy and computer science challenge, and so that makes having one solo course that's digital literacy not quite as necessary, and allows us to let kids explore some other options. Another reason why it's important is that, frankly, students just have expressed an interest in trying something else and wanting to have a little bit more choice in the matter on how their freshman year plays out. So the research is pretty clear that students are more motivated, and I think we all have experienced this in some way. Students are more motivated when they have a choice in the things that they're being asked to do. And students in a new system or a new way of doing this can self-assess and choose a course that better aligns with how they want to proceed forward in the courses they want to take. And then finally, increasingly, and part of our emphasis in the last few years and reflected in the portrait of a graduate, is that we want our students to be healthy and balanced. And when I came on board and when I was looking at our graduation requirements, I was seeing a great deal of emphasis placed on a series of courses that were all out of the one department, which is a wonderful department. Our applied arts department is probably the strongest anywhere in central Massachusetts. And I actually think that works to their advantage, because we don't need to have them have students achieve yet another course in there that's reflected in that requirement where fine and performing arts and applied arts are tied together. Our anticipation is that this change would drive a little bit more traffic and get students to be trying out some of our visual and performing arts classes that maybe they've not tried. We have also a really fantastic visual arts program, and as I showed you in our winter concert, we have a really wonderful performing arts program as well, and this would incentivize students and frankly require them to engage in some courses there. Some very large percentage, I think north of 80 to 85% of our students are already doing that anyway, and so that would not mean suddenly 150 new kids are taking courses that we're not prepared to absorb that, them coming our way. But I think this would reflect our commitment to students having a more varied and healthy and balanced experience. I failed to mention earlier, I apologize, any change to the graduation requirements, as you know, would not take effect and impact all grades. It would impact the incoming 9th grade and would grow up through their 4 years here. And so, again, just referring back, those are the 3 major areas that we were talking about, and just to give you a bit of an overview on the 2 courses that we talked about, and I can give you a kind of a quick overview of how they're a little bit different from each other. Digital literacy and computer science, we call it. It's digital literacy and computer applications currently. I think we're going to change the name. That's actually the more technical of the 2 courses. It's a course where students are provided a broad introduction to a variety of technology topics and exposure to various digital literacy concepts and applications. So that's a course where they learn how computers work, but they also learn all the particulars of Google Drive and Google Slides and the whole Google suite. They also learn Microsoft Office from top to bottom. They have the students emerge from that class with a real strong understanding of Microsoft Office that isn't totally typical of most students, and then you can see the other concepts that they explore. Exploring computer science is a course that would provide for students a strong conceptual foundational understanding of computer science as a problem-solving endeavor and a field of problem-solving. So a lot of that work is about how computers work, but also how to engage in solving problems, how to use computers to do that. So there is some web design in there is some programming in there, but some of it is also to consider how are computers informing political movements in the world, and how is problem solving part of that conversation. So this would provide for students who might be interested in I almost said exploring computer science, but that's true. For a student who might want to learn and enroll in future computer science courses, this would provide a really deep conceptual foundation of computer science as a field. And I could see us potentially, if this change goes through, potentially allowing freshmen to choose one of our other introductory computer science courses like Python programming or HTML coding, and we have a few that are open to freshmen. The reality is freshmen don't have a lot of room in their schedule to add new classes, so we have to be really deliberate about the courses we choose. Do you have any questions?
A lot of good information. Yeah, questions? Karen?
I don't really have a question. I think it's great. I'm all for it. I think, just like you said, it's the applied arts are, everyone takes them. So, especially my kids have taken a lot of those classes, and not necessarily the finer performing arts, which would have been, nice. And I'm all for the exploring computer science versus the digital literacy. I'm just wondering what the department coordinators and the assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, were they involved in this, or, yeah?
Yes, we've had, Sean has worked together with the department leaders here at the high school, and then in addition, Julie Doyle has been involved in conversations with because she has that vertical view of the digital literacy computer science standards, so that we could consider what are students getting in the middle school and how that translates for the vertical alignment. And then I've been involved together with Greg and Sean, and so it's been a well-coordinated effort that Sean's been leading.
And worth noting, I met with the Student Advisory Council last week to talk through this as a potential change. Amelia was part of that group, and they helped me understand, how they think students might respond to this. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Amelia?
I think the idea of increasing the change is great. I think the school already has a lot of options, and I think as students just really enjoy being able to have more autonomy over their learning and the path that they choose.
Thank you. Other questions? Paul?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea too, and, I think, as you said, these kids are getting digital literacy almost by osmosis these days, so that's not really an issue. The only hesitation I might have, and I don't think it's even a hesitation, is the idea of, teaching kids about their digital footprint and just how to be, what they call it, good citizens online, or whatever the term is. But I think we're doing that in the lower grades, is that right?
And and I don't know that it's on my slide, Paul, I apologize, but about 15% of both courses are common, and digital footprint is on both.
Okay.
And I'll just add that we literally start that conversation with the very littlest kids. It is even starting with our librarians are part of our strategy for how we're teaching the digital literacy and computer science standards. And they have picture books that they're reading to the youngest kids, and the conversation continues all the way up through about, just digital citizenship, digital footprint, the risks, safety.
Yeah.
So we're hitting it in a lot of different places through the years. And the other thing I would add is in our conversations, while I agree with you that the kids are sort of, this is the water we're swimming in, like they're in a digital world. One of the things we've talked about, and Sean kind of alluded to, is that while that is true, and it's easy for us to sort of say, they're digitally literate, it's also the world around us is expecting more and more from people in terms of their digital literacy and their computer science. And so I think we want to keep assessing what are the skills, because as we start younger and younger, with infusing, we were in classrooms where kids are working with robots and coding in the elementary schools. We want to keep up, right? And so as they come up through the grades, I think we're going to need to keep reassessing what do those courses include, and what can we assume that they've gotten in previous years, and in what ways can we continue to raise the bar and the standards and expectations around preparing them for having, the computer science knowledge that goes beyond just kind of Microsoft and Google and those things, so.
Okay, thank you.
Sean, I have a question. Would it be possible for you to just go back to what our current requirements are?
Oh, sure.
Thanks. So these are the current requirements?
They are, yeah.
Okay, and can you, I just want to point out that I am 100% in agreement with the change from the digital literacy to adding the computer science component to give that freshman choice. I guess what I would say my concern really here lies in the change to, in the applied arts or fine and performing arts, the 2.5 credits. Can you move to the next slide that has the new change? And removing the applied arts. And I believe in one of the slides later on, you indicate that they have 5 mandatory credits in the applied arts, correct?
Well,
I think they're already taken.
some of the courses that are already on here, digital literacy is an applied arts course, and economics is as well. So, yeah.
I guess, right, so I guess my only concern with removing the or applied arts piece is if we're talking about adding more flexibility and allowing students to take a broader range of classes, I think essentially what we wind up doing is we're now limiting the types of applied arts that students, I mean, they can take whatever applied arts they certainly want. My concern would be we're removing an option for them to use an applied art instead of a performing art, because they have to take economics as an applied art, or they have to take digital literacy as an applied art. So I realize that they're fleshed out as literally individual type courses that are meeting those requirements that have to be taken anyway. So I almost see this as some choices being removed by students, and correct me if I'm wrong in terms of.
No, I think you've spotted that. That's certainly worth responding to. The reality and the lived experience here in the building is that physically where our fine and performing arts portion of the building is, and their low footprint on student schedule as a mandatory part of their experience means that they don't really get a chance to be seen and experienced by a lot of our freshmen, whereas freshmen already have one course where they're on that hallway with the applied arts and they're seeing teachers, they're seeing all the projects on the wall, and it really disadvantages our fine and performing arts program from even being competitive in the market of electives. And they are very healthy, the applied arts, in their enrollments for nutrition. They are elbow to elbow, making, in our food labs, we have a very strong preschool early education program that fills in very strong numbers. And we're looking at, I apologize, I didn't mention this, Mr. Covino, but we are changing the enrollment requirements for early childhood education and allowing freshmen to take that course, whereas we used to not allow that until 10th grade. So that would allow a 9th grader to participate in early childhood education, which is aligned with our preschool. So it allows students to learn the concepts of early childhood education, then become a preschool teacher. You are correct in catching that. I didn't mean to not be clear about that, that this does reduce nominally, some choice from students because it steers them more towards the fine and performing arts. That 85% of our students were finding a way to take it at some point. I do think the reality is that the electives in our applied arts are so appealing, and we're such a business-strong community that I think they're just going to keep filling. They'll have 27 and a half other opportunities. They could literally take 27 and a half more credits, all in social media marketing and an introduction to business and all those programs that make our DECA program be the the strong program that we all know it to be. But you are correct.
No, I wasn't looking to be correct, I just wanted some clarification, I just want to point that out.
Yeah.
But no, thank you very much, I appreciate the explanation, and it makes absolute sense, so, thank you.
Can I just to respond to that, I agree with you. However, but to also put it in perspective, like I'll give a student's perspective who might be interested in like computer science, which is in the applied arts realm. If they're already taking a computer science, they have the opportunity to take it freshman year, then they can also take more of the computer science electives and still take a fine and performing arts, which is, I think, cool. Now they have that an opportunity to get some other enrichment and still get a lot of their engineering / business / applied arts. I don't know. So
Yeah,
I
and-
see it from that perspective too.
If I were to create a pie chart of the departments that offer electives and how many elective sections come out of each department, I'm just going to spitball this one, but I'm going to guess 75% of them are applied arts. I mean, they're just a huge number. And fine and performing arts are many, but there's only 2.5 FTE teachers down there. And there's a handful of classes out of English, like journalism, and a few other kind of niche literature and writing courses. And but really, applied arts, it's an electives engine. It's just a huge electives program, and I think it almost is not necessary to even name it because they get so many kids enrolled in those courses.
I'll just add 2 thoughts. The first is that, I think that I fully support this change. We've had a lot of conversations. This has been years of conversations, and Principal Bevan is now implementing some of those conversations into action. Also, secondly, we'll need to see what the market creates.
That's right.
Implement and then look at the data to see how students are selecting through courses, have conversations with students around what their experiences are, and then come back to the table and talk about, did the change have the intended impact, or did it not? And if not, then what do we need to do differently? Or maybe what we had was the right pathway for most of our kids.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. I presume, perhaps incorrectly, that 110 credits is the min to graduate, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
And what's the average credits that are actually, people are getting?
Several more than that, yeah. It's
So I
very
guess my-
unusual.
My point of observation is, while we're no longer mandating the applied arts to that, the or category, people still have the opportunity
Oh,
to
yeah.
get plenty of, if they choose to. So I think.
And they're aware,
Seems
yes,
totally fine to me.
it's a very astute observation, and our students are aware that colleges don't want to see an empty schedule or schedule with lots of gaps and holes in it, because they want to see students challenging themselves. And the reality is, students legitimately enjoy taking a course like social media marketing, because it's actually a really fun experience, or a class like, you name it, wood technology, or video production, or you name it. There's so many really terrific and wonderful instructors down there. So I think, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It's very unusual that a student struggles to reach graduation because of total credits. It's more often the classes that they struggled in. If you struggle in a singular English class in the whole 4 years you're at school, that means you've got to double up before you exit. And that's where the real pain points come for students who have a hard time.
A couple of things. Applied arts, it's a very strong program, and if I remember correctly, there's like a minor kids can get, which is pretty impressive if they take a certain number of credits. So that's just, it's a nice bonus, and that's created.
The
Also,
Algonquin Business Concentration, it's like a 3-course pathway where
Yeah.
they get
yeah.
an acknowledgement for that.
And then I think this helps we have such strong, and Kathleen would be talking about it if she were here, but it's a strong performing arts program, but for every, part of the Portrait of the Graduate and the strategic plan is to have well-rounded students, and this gives a little bit more opportunity or chance to experience all that. So I think that's important. I guess one question I do have, is that one department, and now we'll have 2 departments with 2 different department chairs, or did it already function?
It already is two departments.
But it was under
entirely.
one kind of title?
Only in our handbook and under
Yeah.
this
Okay.
section, yeah.
Maybe I was thinking budget, so. Okay.
I just have one more comment.
Yep.
And so just for the rest of the committee too, and I'm sure Stephanie is aware that, part of the DLCS standards are that schools in the future and now, you're requiring computer science as a graduation requirement, which is leaps and bounds above a lot of school districts, and that's coming down the pike for the state. So we're already ahead of them by doing this, which I think is good. The other thing too, just again, food for thought for later down the road, but they also can require, can substitute that as a math credit too. Not I'm just saying you could, maybe, because it's so heavily tied with math too, so down the road. And also, what are your thoughts for requiring 4 years of math? Any thoughts?
So, as you might be aware, the Mass Core is a framework that DESE has produced after looking at what industry professionals and colleges shared back to them were the most common experiences of students who were successful at those next levels. And they produced this kind of framework called Mass Core. And in that, I haven't looked at it in a little bit, 4 years of math is a requirement to achieve Mass Core. We're deficient in a few other areas. This wouldn't suddenly switch us into that, but exploring computer science or any computer science would allow us to achieve halfway to math on this. The reality, I think, is that most of our students, because most of our students are 4-year college bound, and the colleges want to see 4 years of math, our students are doing that as a baseline, kind of as a most typical expectation anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's certainly something we're aware of, that I think if we're looking at other places to improve or increase our rigor and the requirements we have, that would probably be a place we would look at. And it wouldn't have huge detrimental effects because, again, most of our kids are already doing it.
Right.
It's almost reflecting what our kids are doing rather than driving what they should be doing.
Yeah. Food for thought.
Yeah. Sorry, that's probably a longer answer than you were looking for, but.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. That's very comprehensive. I mean, it's a lot of information for us to digest, and I think well laid out.
Could I just ask next steps?
Sure. I can take direction from the school committee, just to give you a sense of the timeline at the high school. In order for us to produce a program of studies, this would not slow that down. However, in order for students to begin making their course selections, we would have to alert them to this as a requirement for incoming 9th graders, and we are educating our incoming 9th grade parents on that exact topic in early February. So, I think knowing how the committee would like to proceed on this, I think in the next month would probably be certainly helpful. I don't think an answer tonight is certainly necessary. It's the first time you're ever hearing about it, and you might want to hear from your families and constituents about this. But the work back is really early February.
I guess the comment I would make is I think that, like you said, the graduation requirements really are driving what we want our students to do. So I do think that, these requirements really do represent and reflect our community's values, what we want our graduates to be. So I would certainly be in favor of adding this to the agenda for a vote in January.
Yeah, I was going to recommend that we, have this as an agenda item for action in January, especially since Kathy and Kathleen aren't here, and Kathleen, 3 members aren't here to be a part of the discussion and vote.
Could I just make a recommendation, because this, unless I'm mistaken, wasn't in the materials? Can I recommend that maybe a memo be sent out to the other members with the deck explaining it, so they can be prepared to come and vote?
Sure.
I'm also supportive. I had some questions, but
Yep.
committee members kind of threw out responses.
Of course I can do that, yeah. And I'm sorry I did not explain this, but I presented this information to the school council to get feedback, and that kind of shaped my presentation tonight, as well to the student council, and I'll be presenting it to the APTO. So just kind of, the more eyes on it and the more feedback I can gather will let me know if there's, areas I need to think more about, but certainly getting these materials out to you is very, very easy to do. I can do that through Greg.
Good point. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Any other topics?
Nope, that's everything.
All right. So next, in terms of the superintendent's report, is the enrollment report as of November 15th. So as of November 15th, we had 1 more student than we had in October, so 1,217 students. And as you all know, enrollment tends to remain very steady at this time of the school year. Also in your packet is the annual requirement of auditing our other post-employment benefits. So we did receive the audit report, and Becky Pellegrino will provide a summary.
Yes, so as a result of establishing it's the OPEB trust account, which stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, the district is required to have an annual valuation done, actuarial valuation completed. So the report that is in your packet is for fiscal year 2022. And as you will note, that our liability went from $46,633,686 as of June 30th, 2021, to $37,265,832 as of June 30, 2022. So the $11 million decrease is really due to higher rates on municipal bonds. As it was explained to me by Parker Elmore, who is our actuarial for Odyssey Advisors, because our balance in our account is so low, really, there's one factor that's driving our liability balance, and that is the municipal bond index. So specifically, the 20-year muni bond index increased from 2.18% to 4.09% over the course of this year, of that fiscal year. And so it really did impact their calculation in terms of what our actual liability would be. So anytime there are higher rates in the municipal bond, we're going to see a lower liability. And then conversely, if the feds do decide to decrease the rates, we will see a higher liability. So overall, he did report to me, it is good news, the reduction is good news, but it really doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things, because it really does not have, a lot to do with the real cost of the plan. And so I welcome any questions on this audit.
Any questions, Paul?
The last thing you said, it doesn't mean much. Is it basically because the rates could change again?
The rates could change again. And actually, if you look on page 12 of the report, it shows how just a 1% increase can really impact our account by $6.7 million. So because of the small balance, we're really, I think, more susceptible to some wide swings in our valuation right now.
Yeah, it's just a present value concept. So when your interest rates are lower, the current value of your liability is higher. Just because you can't get a return on that to pay for what your liabilities are. And so your cash flows are going to remain unchanged because you have actual pension participants. They're going to get their pension payments as they need them. Just the present value of those today.
Yep.
Trying to think what Paul Butker would ask right now.
This is
I almost started saying I'm going to channel Paul Butker right now, but.
Any company that has pension liabilities, this is what you're seeing, is the actuarial assumptions are driving pension liabilities down because interest rates are up.
And in our case, it's more so our retirees' health insurance. And so because this is to actually fund the future value of any health insurance costs for our retirees.
So I think the bigger conversation that the committee needs to entertain is the investment in this OPEB trust. And how are we going to make consistent annual investments into this trust to close the gap of this unfunded liability?
Yeah.
I think over the past 3 years, we've made some initial investments in the FY22 budget. There is a nominal $25,000 investment into this trust, which is not enough, but it's a start, and I think it's part of a larger conversation.
And continued funding of it also affects like our bond rating or things like that. So, I mean, it's one of those things that's always in the future and may or may not come true, but it affects us now, like if we're trying to borrow money.
It's a liability, unfunded liability, and the bond council will look at our commitment to meeting that liability and funding that liability consistently over time. Just the fact that the committee established a trust was a step in the right direction, and the information that we received, just the fact that we're making a deposit into that trust on an annual basis, again, even if it's a nominal amount, is a step in the right direction, which impacts our bond rating favorably.
forgive me if you're not knowing, but, so the payment into the trust, is that a budget item for the year? So like, if you wanted to actually pay, you'd have to increase your budget item to
Correct.
fund the trust?
Correct.
Yeah. There are a lot of places that don't have it in, and I think we created a policy, if I get that right, to make it an item every year. A lot of places just kind of put it off and maybe look at their E&D and kind of decide annually where we made a commitment to it, and then we can go above it at any time.
And having,
Yeah, so is this one of the things we can pay for out of E&D?
so what we would want to do is make sure that we have the line in our budget each year, and then at the end of the year, if we have funds that we are going to be putting in E&D, we could instead make a payment into the OPEB trust.
So do we have a line?
We
in
have
the-
a line,
Okay.
yes, we
Yeah,
have
okay.
25,000 this
Yeah,
year.
that's what okay.
So the conversation that Becky and I have had is we will make that payment at the end of, in June. When we have a better sense of where our fiscal year '23 budget is. But it is part of the budget conversation moving forward in FY '24 of how much do we want it to include in that line item? And how much can the budget support in this upcoming fiscal year?
Which we're moving in that direction down the
Yes.
agenda. Okay.
So next in your packet is the FY '23 monthly general fund expenditure report. And while I'm, yes,
Oh, I don't know, do we have to vote for that?
This is more of a valuation report versus like a formal audit. We have those every 3 years, so I think this is just a report to the committee on the status.
I think it never hurts to vote anything that's financial, but I don't think it's necessary. So the FY '23 monthly general fund expenditure report, and Becky will also review the FY '23 statement of revenue and review the approval of FY '23 grants. Yes.
The monthly general fund report that's in your packet is as of November 30th, 2022. At that point in time, we had just over $1 million. We had $1,068,000, or 4.15% remaining on the bottom line. Last year's report, we had 4.15% remaining on the bottom line, and just over $1 million. It was $1,036,000. So as you can see, we are trending exceptionally close to where we were last year at this point. We continue to watch our heating and our electricity costs, as those are the ones that are really, we're seeing some fluctuation in, but otherwise I really have no concerns to report on the FY '23, what year are we in? '23 fiscal year.
Questions on the expenditure?
I make a motion to accept the monthly general fund expenditure report until audited.
Chris makes the motion,
Second.
second by Paul. All in favor to accept that? Unanimous pass. Thank you.
Okay.
And can I just make a note on page 6 of the report? You will see the OPEB trust line item.
Thank you. In terms of the,
I noticed that, since you pointed that out, it must be the line item then for the current funding of the liabilities in the current year. Like, so the actual benefits that people are receiving during that year.
so there's line items for, there is retiree health insurance, there's a line item for our employees' health insurance. So there are line items for those.
So like, would you agree that if you got to a point where the OPEB was fully funded, then your current year line item for the retirees would be 0, and then you actually.
Because we
so
could,
it's just
we could really,
shifting-
yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could draw off of that account. Mhm. With the 46 million or 37 million, though, it may be a while before we get there.
True.
Yes.
True, however, it's all about the participants, and
Sure.
life expectancy, people will
Yeah.
fall, unfortunately,
Yeah.
people will fall off,
Mhm.
new people
Yeah.
will come in, and if you have a steady run rate of annual costs, that could be,
Mhm.
yes, it's an unfunded liability because you have to pay it throughout someone's duration of life. However, reality is, this is the way it
Sure.
works. So like, you can,
Mhm.
you're just shifting dollars. You
Yes.
can make a bigger budget now, but
And we are looking at different ways as well, where we may be able to bring down that liability in terms of looking at some of our retirees' health insurance offerings, and making some adjustments there to the good for the employee.
Statement of revenue?
Okay. So during the month of November, we did receive the town of Northborough's December 1st assessment, and that was their second quarterly payment in fiscal year '23. You will note that our athletic receipts continue to trend according to our projections. We have also received the first quarterly payments for the circuit breaker tuition and transportation. I think I did tell the committee last month that they had finally approved those figures for FY '23. So we were glad to see those first quarterly payments come in.
Questions about the revenue? A motion?
I move that we approve the statement of revenue as of November 30th, 2022, until audited.
Thank you, Paul.
Second.
Chris, all in favor? Motion passes unanimously. And approval of grants.
Okay, and so lastly, in your packet is an accounting of all of the federal grants that the district has received in FY '23. These federal entitlement grants are Titles 1, 2A, 3, and 4, as well as the IDEA Special Education Grant. These 5 grants total $434,631, and at this time, I would ask the committee to vote to approve these beneficial grants. Each of them really do add a lot to the programming here at Algonquin, and help us to continue some of the work that's being done in the classrooms.
Questions about those grants? Is the Title I grant holding steady, or I'm kind of surprised we're still getting some?
It's been pretty steady. It went down a little bit, but it's been pretty steady.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just have a question? Can you give just a brief, overview of how the Title I funds are used at the high school?
Sure, and yeah, I'm happy to share about any of these. Right now, so we've often had tutoring that has been particularly for students who are at risk of not passing different parts of the MCAS. And so we've continued that as needed. But one of the primary strategies we've used the last couple of years is we have focused on math. And we have a tutor who is here 3 days a week and works, is available for students, and particular students are being assigned to work with her. And it's provided content expertise for students who sometimes were getting extra support, but from people who didn't have math expertise.
Yep.
And so she is primarily available outside of the classroom for extra support that might be assigned to a focused study period and then going to her to get extra support. I think she is sometimes doing a little bit of push-in support into classes as well when that option is there. So our primary strategy right now is around math support with some MCAS tutoring.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions? A motion to accept?
I move that we accept the grants as listed in the packet, in the total amount of $434,631.
Thank you. Paul with the motion and Matt with the second. All in favor? Passes unanimous. Okay, great.
So next in your packet is the FY '24 budget priorities, which were approved at the November meeting. And just note that on the first page, under bullet number 5, the addition was seek capital funding from the towns of Northborough and Southborough to fund the Algonquin Regional High School Athletic Complex project. Also in your packet is the budget calendar for FY '24. It is hard to believe it is December 21st, and this evening is a major milestone in terms of the budget process, and that is presenting the preliminary budget to the committee. I'd also note that on January 28th, the Southborough Board of Selectmen is hosting departments to present their budgets. So the pre-K through 8 Southborough and the regional budget will be presented at that time. It's Saturday, and I believe it is at 8 o'clock. And we just learned of that today, so we will send out a communication
In the morning?
in the morning
Oh,
on a Saturday.
great.
So,
I just had one question. On the budget priorities, because that will be going to the different financial boards in the towns, could we make an edit and put John's name into it?
of course,
And what was that date again?
January 28th,
What time?
8 o'clock, 8 to 10.
Okay, thank you.
And then next is the presentation of the FY24 preliminary budget.
The capital.
Yes, so I
That
skipped
was-
over the capital plan.
I
So-
did it myself just earlier. so.
In the packet is the FY24, FY28 capital plan, which was again voted last month. And I would just highlight again the accomplishment of crossing off one of those capital projects, which Principal Bevan indicated is that Project Adventure course repair and design, which has been on the capital plan for at least 4 or 5 years. So job well done, committee. You can have this
Thank
back.
you.
All right, just give me a minute to connect.
While you're connecting, I don't know, you need to go backwards, but I was just looking back at the budget priorities. And maybe John is happy to be on it, but I'm just, what you were expressing was the edit that we requested back in November, and then it was approved in November?
I was just noting the change that we approved, the committee approved in November, and it's reflected officially on this document.
Right, so can we add John to it if it was already approved?
We can.
All right.
Yep. All right, so, so this evening, I'm pleased to present the FY24 preliminary budget, and I will make a note that it is very early in terms of the budget process. We need much more financial data and information from a variety of sources, but the presentation that I'm presenting tonight is the best-known information that we have. Moving forward, we will fine-tune this budget. So I think it's really important to talk about what we are about as an educational organization. We are a mission and vision-driven organization. Our mission is simple. It's educate, inspire, and challenge all students. And our vision really centers on what type of graduate we want leaving Algonquin Regional High School. So our challenge is to make sure that our graduates are collaborators, critical and creative thinkers, communicators, socially and civically engaged, growth-oriented, healthy, and balanced. And part of the work that we do is really driven around the strategic plan, Vision 2026, and the school improvement plan the high school created. So in terms of the budget process, I just will note that the budget process starts early in the year, in September. Becky mentioned that she wasn't sure what fiscal year she was in. There are times when she's exiting a fiscal year, entering a fiscal year, and starting a new, so there's all sorts of, but right now, we are in fiscal year '24 and preparing for that budget. I think some key milestones is the work that the Principal Bevan and his team does around working with department chairs and educators, thinking about what types of requests and what types of asks that will be included in the budget. Those were due to the financial team at the end of October, and Becky and the financial team organized those asks and requests from Principal Bevan and department chairs and directors, and created a preliminary budget, which we'll be presenting this evening. I think in terms of milestones after December is really getting better data from the state. We should learn about the governor's budget a little bit later this year. Typically, it is released at the end of January. However, because we have a transition in governor, We are anticipating that we will not receive the budget information until March. So a lot of the information that we will be providing over the next several months will be our best projections based on historical data. And then just lastly, we're working toward the March and April town meetings in both communities and making sure we have strong support from the boards and committees and the citizens of each community. So as we look at fiscal year '24, we always think about what are the unknowns and budget variables. So we have a number of unknowns at this point in time. As you know, we are in a negotiation year with our collective bargaining units. So one unknown at this point in time is what the financial impact will be of those negotiations. We have a tentative agreement around the language with Algonquin Regional Teachers Association, and we are working on negotiating the financial pieces in the next month ahead, but at this point, it is unknown. We discussed the out-of-district special education tuition increase, which was 14%. So how that will play out and impact the overall budget once advocacy is completed is unknown, but right now we're assuming that there's a 14% increase, but we're hopeful that that will not be the final number, and that will be decreased significantly. Special education transportation, we are seeing increased costs in special education transportation. At this point, we have our best projections, but again, that number will become more clear in the months ahead. We are seeing an increased cost in energy that is factored in this budget, and we are monitoring current energy costs very closely so we can have a good projection moving forward for next year. And then just unknown is the impact of inflation on the power of a dollar. So we are seeing the impact of inflation on the cost of supplies and materials and cost of services. And the purchasing power of our dollar is being impacted by those inflationary headwinds. We are hopeful that inflation will continue in a downward trend in the months ahead. But again, it is an unknown at this point in time. And lastly, insurance rates. So the regional school district is no different than a town as an entity. So the district is responsible for insurance rates, and we are working closely with our healthcare consultant on trying to identify what those rate increases will look like. And at this point in time, we do not have that data. And we have a projection built into the current budget that I'm presenting. So again, the approved budget priorities. So again, we are a goal-oriented organization. I think that if you speak to school committees around the state, not all school committees have budget priorities that help drive the budget process. So this is very helpful in terms of the work that we do as a team to make difficult decisions if it becomes a difficult budget season. And we will use these to prioritize what we ask for and also help guide the requests that we'll make to the committee. So where are we today? So as I mentioned, at the end of October, budgets were due to the finance team, and those requests totaled $25,727,081, and that was without reducing or removing any of the requests from principals. I'm sorry, that FY23 budget was $25,727,081. The initial budget requests from principals and directors totaled a little more than $28 million, which represented an 8.97% increase over fiscal year '23. The target range that we are looking at is 3 to 4.5% increase. From the 8.9%, we did apply circuit breaker of $873,465. So the preliminary budget currently is at a 5.57% increase which reflects a $1,433,465 increase over fiscal year '23. To give you a benchmark of where we were at this point last year, you can see that we are about 1% more than we were last year at this time. So we are actually in a pretty good fiscal position as we're entering into the preliminary budget with the assumptions that we made in terms of the budget variables at this time. So in terms of when we think about budget increases, so this is just a table that shows what a 1% increase to the fiscal year '23 budget looks like. So when we think about a budget increase of 1%, it's about a $250,000 increase. So that just gives us kind of a benchmark when we're thinking about what a 3%, 4%, and 5% increase looks like over fiscal year '23. It gives us kind of a guidepost. So budget drivers in the fiscal year '24 budget. So student and staff devices. So again, we have a need to upgrade and replace our student and staff devices, specifically student devices that will allow for students to take MCAS. So this is part of that plan that we have. We're also seeing an increase in Worcester Regional Retirement System. So we're seeing an increase of $93,000. Out of special education out of district transportation, we're seeing an increase of a little over $93,000. Utilities, electricity, and heating, we are anticipating a little under $130,000 increase over fiscal year '23. And then insurances, so health, liability, workers' comp is a little over $330,000. And lastly, salary increases and COLAs, total a little under $725,000. So the budget drivers that we're experiencing total a little bit over 6% and equal $1,453,593. So in terms of budget offsets at this point in time, so the two budget offsets that we have are FY23 circuit breaker tuition reimbursement of a little over $850,000, and then FY23 circuit breaker transportation reimbursement of a little under $20,000. And I'll just note that the Student Opportunity Act included circuit breaker transportation reimbursement. That is new. But as you can see, we are not seeing a windfall in terms of state aid as a result of the Student Opportunity Act, which is disappointing. We were anticipating that we'd receive more funds in that area to offset the overall costs of transporting special education students out of district. So one of the exercises the leadership team at the high school engaged in was thinking about what type of staffing requests they would like to see in the fiscal year '24 budget. So these are the positions that were requested: internship and externship coordinator, library ESP, PG reading tutor, a human resource generalist. So this is a shared position between Southborough Pre-K through 8 and Northborough Pre-K through 8. The .3 is the regionals portion of that position. Team chairperson, and then a .2 adaptive physical education teacher, and then varsity assistant coaches. These positions at this point in time are not included in the preliminary budget that I am presenting to you this evening, and it represents an increase of 3.46 FTEs. And would add about a % increase to the preliminary budget that you are being presented with this evening. In terms of instructional materials and supports, so what is included in the budget are a variety of instructional materials that were requested from department chairs. As you know, the high school has a 5-year replacement cycle for textbooks and curriculum materials. We did fall off following that replacement cycle. This gets us back on track in terms of meeting what the plan was. And also, we do have the student and staff devices that we mentioned earlier in terms of making sure we keep our devices current. So instructional materials and supports that are included in the preliminary budget total a little over $140,000.
And can I point out one other thing?
Sure.
The fine arts transportation is also included in that, and that was part of Amy's presentation last month as well, so.
Thank you. So in terms of enrollment comparison and projection, so one of the areas where we monitor very closely is our enrollments for each community, Northborough and Southborough, and overall enrollment at Algonquin Regional High School. So as you can see from enrollment projections through FY22 through FY27, we were experiencing a decline in enrollment in prior years. In fiscal year '24, moving forward, we're going to be experiencing a slight increase in enrollment, but for the most part, enrollment is, I would say for the most part, plateauing with a slight increase over time. This actually is good news. I think it helps us create a budget that actually supports a consistent enrollment. One of the areas that we hear a lot from the community is, because your enrollment is declining, why aren't we seeing the budget decrease by that enrollment amount? And I would just speak to the fact that the committee has done an excellent job looking at class sizes, making sure that we are meeting the student needs, and using the opportunity for declining enrollment to actually create class sizes that are within the school committee's class size policy. And also, I would just add that in a time as we're exiting the pandemic, having smaller class sizes really provides educators an opportunity to make strong connections with their students. And this has been a great opportunity for us. So I would characterize the FY24 preliminary budget, a level services budget with growth in targeted areas. So it is level staffing, level servicing in terms of the student experience. At this point in time, the preliminary budget is $27,160,546, which reflects a 5.57 increase over fiscal year '23. Just a note on inflation rates. So if we look at the look back of the past decade of inflation rates, as we are all experiencing, inflation is having an impact on our overall budgets, our personal budgets, and our business budgets, and our educational budgets. So when we think of the current, the preliminary budget increase still is below the inflationary impact that we are experiencing. I'd also like to point out that the fiscal year '24 actually completely eliminates the student activity fees. So the school committee in fiscal year '23 budget set a 2-year goal of removing student activity fees. Although it was $50, the first year was reducing by $25, and year 2 was removing. So there will no longer be a student activity fee beginning in FY24. Which is a step in the right direction to begin to think about how to not rely on fees to subsidize the overall operational budget. And then lastly, we'll just speak to the athletic complex bond and project and some information that we'd like to share that is connected to the overall budget in terms of the debt assessment that we are thinking about moving forward to each of the communities. But before we go into this portion of the presentation, I'll stop and answer any questions about the fiscal year '24 operational budget presented at this point in time.
Questions? Karen?
You can go. I love it. I have a question about, so for example, when you talk about class sizes and the potential program of studies graduation requirement, like what if you had all these kids who wanted to take freshman year computer science? How, I'm sure you maybe have looked at that, but how would that impact those classes?
So we looked at students' second-tier choices last year, the ones they couldn't get into because there was no room, and it's clear we're really able to absorb, where they're going to end up easily. I think more likely some of them will go to fine and performing arts where we have capacity.
So there wouldn't be a need to like add a teacher? or
No,
anything?
no.
And I noticed that you had a thing for a team chairperson, and do we not have a team chairperson at the high school right now?
So we have 1.5 school psychologists, and part of the responsibility is serving as a portion of that time as a team chairperson. But it's not equivalent to a full-time team chair.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
I just have one. As a variable, you had mentioned an increase in energy cost. I was just curious, historically, how has the usage of the school solar panels played a role in offsetting some of those costs?
So great question. We have benefited from having the solar array on Algonquin's roof. We are seeing a significant decrease in the kilowatt usage. However, the cost of energy has increased, so we're not seeing any savings. Becky, do you want to speak to the analysis that you've done?
Sure. So while the kilowatts have gone down, unfortunately, our electricity contract for our supply rate expired in October. So it means now that we are paying more for the kilowatts that we're not able to generate through the solar array. And obviously at this time of year, the amount that we're drawing off of the solar panels is decreasing. So we do see the ability for our electricity bills to go down over the summer months and when it's a little bit, more sunny out. But right now, we are seeing an increase in those costs. And unfortunately, our rate almost doubled in terms of what we are paying per unit. And this is a cooperative group that we participate in through the Mass Municipal Association, and we work with the town of Northborough, and unfortunately, communities across the state are seeing these rates as well.
So one way to look at it is without the solar array at Algonquin, our energy cost would be about a $30,000 increase from what we are experiencing in the projections.
And I will say also that Mr. Gorman, the facilities manager, has done a great job too at trying to look at some of the programs that are being offered through National Grid and through other vendors in terms of putting some light fixtures in that are more energy efficient. And so we're continuing to look at those projects to try to continue to reduce that usage as well.
Other questions?
Out of curiosity,
Go ahead.
Out of curiosity, this solar array, is it maximized?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
I guess my point of observation is, why not put more out?
Yeah, so I think, we have more capacity. So this was a proof of concept. And actually, we have a solar, an energy study group looking at ways we can become more efficient. We can expand, and that is part of the work that we'll be discussing and thinking about moving forward.
Right. I think you were part of that group, right?
I'm on that
Oh,
subcommittee.
okay. Question, Paul?
Yeah, all the positions you mentioned that, you said they were not part of this budget, is that right?
Correct.
Is there any thought about prioritizing them, including some of them?
Yeah, so we did have a budget meeting yesterday, I believe, and some of the work that we will be doing is prioritizing these positions. I think there's a general consensus that one of the top priorities is really looking at that internship and externship coordinator position to really help get that moving and really provide the attention that work needs.
Yep. Or maybe it doesn't have to be full-time. But yeah, that's kind of the one I was thinking of too.
I just ask about the student and staff devices. I mean, comparatively to some of the other increases, it's not as large, but is that, I think we purchased quite a bit probably during the pandemic. Is is that charge going to be there each year? Is that like how much it is for, or are we on a tiered like implementation cycle, like freshmen get a new device or I don't know.
So currently, we are not a one-to-one
Right.
district-issued device program. It's a bring-your-own device. This actually allows us to implement year one, so the incoming freshman class, we will be providing a device, and we are moving toward a one-to-one district-issued device program for a variety of reasons. One being, it's been very challenging managing students bringing in their devices. There's a continuum of the types of devices, and this will help us kind of streamline that process and actually give the technology department a more systematic effort in terms of the devices they are supporting.
Okay. So like next year, will that be a similar budget item then? Like we can expect this year after year then?
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question. Will students still have the option to bring in a device, or will it be mandated that they use a school one?
So it will be, for freshmen, they will be issued devices from the district.
So they won't have the choice to bring one in if they want? Okay.
It's kind of an equity issue also. Making sure everyone has, yeah.
Yep.
Other questions?
All right, so just, the next item on the agenda is the athletic complex project update. So we did include a couple slides to share where we are with the athletic complex. Last evening, Keith Lavoie, Becky, Paul Desmond, David Roman, and I did meet with the select board in Southborough, the advisory, and the capital committees. And we did present the project to the boards and committees and answered questions. During that presentation, we presented some information that was basically hot off the press in terms of the financial aspects of the project. So this evening, I've asked Becky to provide the committee with an update of some of the information we've learned. So you have that information as well as a committee.
I've been working with David Eisenthal at Unibank, who's our financial advisor, and he was able to put together a few scenarios for us just to look at and also to share with the two communities so that we might be able to show the tax impact of this project on both communities, as well as look at some different financing scenarios that may be more favorable for the two towns. So when he was preparing these scenarios for us, he did make a few assumptions in his preparation, and one is that the project does begin this summer and it ends in the fall of 2023. He does anticipate that there is a 15-year maximum maturity on the bond, and he is confirming that with our bond counsel as well. That it is a level debt service repayment. And the scenario that we've put together is that the district would issue bond anticipation notes in July of 2023 and would then reissue them in July of 2024 and 2025, which would mean that we would be paying interest only for the first 2 years, and that would be in FY 25 and 26. And then we would issue a general obligation bond in July of 2026. Since we would be issuing the bands for the first 2 to 3 years, our required principal payment on that bond anticipation note in FY 27 would then need to be, and this is a mouthful, equal to the first year principal payment for a 13-year level debt service amortization, to kind of make up for the fact that we were only paying interest in those years. And then he also did assume an interest rate of 3.5% for both the bond anticipation notes and the general obligation bond. So this next scenario would show what the what the project would mean for the town of Northborough specifically. And he did include in the column that Greg's pointing to the outstanding debt service that is still remaining on the addition and renovation here at the high school that took place back in 2004. You can see that that debt will be falling off the books in fiscal year 2027. The athletic complex, there would be no assessment to the towns until fiscal year 2025. And in those first 2 years, it would be an interest-only payment. And then in fiscal year 2027, that's when we would make that larger payment to start the general obligation bond. And then we would have a more consistent payment over the remaining years of the bond. So for Northborough, we did make some assumptions in terms of enrollments, but you can really see that the tax rate implications for both of the projects for the first 5 years range from 17 cents to 31 cents. That's the high year of FY '27. And then afterwards, it really does stabilize where it's about a 12% impact to the tax rate. And the average household would see a range of a low of $67 impact to $176. And then Southborough, using that same calculation, again, that FY '27 year is really the highest year because you would be having the full payments on both of those projects for 1 year. So the tax rate impact would be 26 cents per thousand, or $212.74 for the average household. And then it would stabilize after FY '27, where it would be about an $81 per year impact to the average household's taxes. So this was one of the scenarios that we this was the scenario that we presented last night. And I have received some feedback that this is the type of model that at least one of our communities would like to see, just because it does fit in nicely with their current capital plan and their debt service.
Paul?
Can I just clarify that? So, and this assumes we have no money from CPC, correct?
Correct. This is fully funding the project through a bond offering.
Other questions? I appreciate those charts. I mean, that makes it really transparent for anyone who's wondering. Yeah, those are really helpful. Okay, no other questions? So, no, so where are we? Where are we at this point? What are we?
Yeah, so I think that the athletic complex project committee is continuing its work. We still have to meet with the boards and committees in Northborough. I think the next step for the committee is at the January, the earliest, and February at the latest. The school committee needs to make a decision around whether it's going to approve this project. So at that point in time, Gale Associates will have the 100% cost estimates. And then at that point in time, the school committee will take a vote to move forward with the project and issue debt. And then that will trigger conversations with both communities. That will trigger it being on the warrant article, and the towns will have to vote, taxpayers will have to vote whether they approve the project or not, approve the assessment. But it's really up to the committee to vote and to approve the project moving forward, and then getting support at the town meetings from each of the communities. And that does require the committee to have a 2/3 vote for this to move forward as a committee.
So we have 2 action items for January.
Correct.
Okay. Well, at least 2.
Can we expect to have the 100% figure in January?
Yes, I did ask Kathy Hervel from Gale Associates this morning, and she said that they're very close and that she anticipates that we'll have it beginning in January, so yes.
Will the subcommittee report out then?
Yeah,
at that time?
so at the January meeting, we can have the subcommittee present a more formal presentation of where we are what the committee is potentially voting on, and what the next steps are.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe this is presumptuous to ask, but so assuming it gets out of this committee, and then goes into town warrant, and for whatever particular reason, either both towns reject, one town rejects, does the project just die then, or?
Not necessarily. We'll have to work with the community. If it passes in one and not the other, the community where it doesn't pass, we'll have to have conversations around next steps. But there are some options that we will have as a committee to try to continue to move this project forward.
A lot of unknowns.
Like another, potentially another town meeting, for example.
So you'd be, okay, yeah. Until it gets approved.
The last thing I'll just end on in terms of the regional budget, so at this point in time, it is very early in the process that there are so many unknowns in terms of the state budget, which really impacts our regional budget. So state education aid, regional transportation, circuit breaker, the apportionment and assessments are all unknown at this time. And I predict that it will be challenging in terms of we won't have that information until March. Because again, the governor's budget is not due until the beginning of March.
March 1st.
So it could.
Super late.
The good news is we have some pretty good historical cost estimates that we've used that have been fairly accurate. But it is a variable in this budget process this year that is unique.
And as in past years, I'm sure just to make people aware, you're in constant contact with the town managers and trying to fit this into their expectations too.
Correct.
And I will say that DESE and Mars have also provided trainings as well for looking at both the Chapter 70 and the minimum local contribution calculation. They've provided some spreadsheets for us, and we are doing that work to try to come up with a good estimate. Although we did this exercise a few years ago with Mars, and didn't bring up quite what they ended up being, but we're hopeful that from doing these exercises internally, we'll have a better sense of what Chapter 70 will look like.
Thanks. Any other questions before we go to old business? Old business.
So the Coalition for Equity did hold a meeting on December 8th. A significant topic of discussion was really around the school calendar. We are forming a Coalition for Equity working group to continue those conversations around religious observances, continuity of the school year and school days. And the coalition will be meeting early in January just to begin those conversations in preparation for a presentation to the combined committees for vote potentially on the 23-24 calendar.
Which would be like is March our next?
Policy is May is the latest. You have to have a calendar voted by May, so.
Yep.
I think, again, it's been past practice to try to get the calendar voted December, January, so that parents can look at the calendar and make some decisions. But I think that this year it's going to be most
March.
likely March.
Okay. Great. Any questions? No?
Yeah, did that include representatives of the various religious communities?
It does. So we have expanded the working group, so we have reached out to religious leaders, and they'll be joining the conversation.
So that's in January?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Was there anything with appointments or?
No.
Okay. So next is to move into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Algonquin Regional Teachers Association. And due to the my determination that the discussion regarding this matter in open meeting may have detrimental effect on the position of the committee with no intent to return to open meeting. So we need a motion to,
So moved.
and then that has to, so Paul moved it, and I need a second.
Second?
Matt, I always get confused. We need to individually vote to go to executive session? Okay.
Yes.
Before you do that, do you want to make an opportunity for public comment?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
is that, okay. Before we do that, anyone in the public? We're good, okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second, so it's an individual vote, so Karen?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Myself, yes, and John, thank you.
Yes?
Yes. So we will go to executive session without any intent to reconvene in open session.